Alright, welcome back to Honored Madman. I hope everybody's doing well. Today we're going to cover something I've wanted to talk about for a while. Actually, since I started the channel, I'm of course referring to the HBO TV series Peacemaker. And since its second season is currently still airing, I figured what better time than now to talk about it. And I'm going to do a sort of review and give you guys my thoughts on the 5 episodes that we've seen. And I believe that all the people who got review copies and were able to give reviews only got episodes 1 through 5. So I figured, why not do a video on it now that I've had access to the same materials that the reviewers got access to. I got to figure out how to become one of those people who gets that. I guess I probably need more of a following. But anyway, the first season of Peacemaker was probably one of my favorite TV shows or seasons of TV of all time, and there's a lot of shows in that list of my favorite seasons of TV of all time. But I think that in no way diminishes how good or how much I love this first season of Peacemaker, and the second season is pretty good so far too, and we're going to get to that. But that first season is something special. It's got that excellent soundtrack. Basically every single song, no, not even basically, every single song is good on it. And every episode sort of just gives you more and more, and it builds the two kind of concurrent plot lines up as it goes on, and they sort of intersect with each other, and then there's payoff in the 7th and 8th episodes. It's just an excellent fucking season of TV. It really is. Now, that came out 3 years ago, and I did want to do a video on it when it came out. I was just sort of figuring out how YouTube worked at the time. But maybe I'll make a whole video on the first season someday. Suffice it to say, it's a pretty solid season of TV if you're into the superhero or action genre or even sci-fi. There's a little bit of that in there. Anyway, we're here to talk about season 2, not season 1. So let's get right into it. This is going to be one of the more loose videos. I'm going to try to come out with these more often, talking about shows. So there might be minimal editing, but I'll try to see what I can get away with. Alright, so Peacemaker Season 2 has finally begun airing roughly 3 years after the first season. Now that is quite a while. So this obviously takes place in James Gunn's DCU, the same setting of his most recent Superman movie and the animated series Creature Commandos. Now Peacemaker, I believe, takes place something like a couple months after Superman, and I believe like 6 or so months after the first season. I could be wrong on that. But we get to see how everybody's doing after the pretty positive ending of that first season. Peacemaker, he quickly gets rejected by the Justice Gang of the Superman movie, and they're all being pretty mean. Now, I will say a lot of the jokes maybe didn't land for me here, and that could just be because they were at Peacemaker's expense, and I'm realizing I may have a certain attachment to this character, Peacemaker, and I don't like to see people bag on him, especially when they haven't really done anything to warrant any type of praise that I've seen. It's kind of like, come on, they're still treating him like he's a fucking idiot. Like, this guy deserves at least a little bit of respect or recognition for the previous season, but no, he doesn't get any. At least not from the bowl cut sporting Captain Mal. And I think Chris, or Peacemaker's position in life at this point, is indicative of the other members of the 11th Street Kids, who we see also aren't doing too great. I mean, Adebayo has her own private security firm, which is just her. Economos is back working at Argus after we last saw him at Bellreeve. Harcourt has effectively been given a burn notice and has toxic masculinity, which really surprises nobody. I'm figuring this is probably why I find her general attitude and demeanor so relatable. But if you thought she was pissed off in season 1, she's even more angry here. And we're told that something happened between her and Peacemaker. We don't know what, at least not yet as of episode 4. We know something happened and it was on a boat, but not really any of the specifics. And they both kind of are weird about it when they talk about it. But we'll touch more on that later. Now, when it comes to everybody's favorite character, Vigilante, he's sort of in the exact same position in life as we last saw him. He's still a costumed vigilante. He's got a bit more recognition from the public, at least after Adebayo credited him and Peacemaker with saving the world from the butterfly invasion. But his overall lot in life as Adrian Chase is pretty much unchanged. He still works at Fennel Fields. His coworker, who we last saw was a dishwasher, is now the manager, and Adrian is presumably still a busboy. And this kind of reminds me, I noticed in the first couple episodes there were a lot of jokes that were sort of callback jokes to the first season. We've got, Adrian not knowing facts he claims to know about certain things. You've got somebody accidentally airdropping a nude photo of something somewhere they shouldn't. And it's not even just jokes either. There's just a lot of in general callbacks, like Harcourt has this big fight in a bar that she actually loses this time, which seems to be a parallel to the first bar fight we saw her in season 1, where she quickly dealt with the problem and it didn't really escalate further because she wasn't in a super pissed off mood. This time she was out to get her ass kicked. That's kind of what she wanted, at least judging by that smile at the end. And there is, of course, a reason for Harcourt's and Adebayo's current state in life. And that's because Adebayo outed her mom for all of her shady government dealings behind the scenes at the end of season 1. And we're told that because of this, Harcourt and Adebayo, as a result, were sort of blackballed from working in any of the alphabet agencies of our government, or the U.S. government. We're told that this was one of Waller's last acts on her way out to sort of screw over Harcourt and her daughter, but I'm not entirely convinced because it seems like if Rick Flag Sr., the current head of Argus, wanted to, he could undo said blackballing, but he doesn't, which leads me to believe that he is in fact the one behind Amelia Harcourt's burn notice. I think he's bitter, he's bitter that his son's best friend, instead of killing Peacemaker, has buddied up with him and become a member of his friend group. Now, speaking of Rick Flag Sr., let's talk a little bit about some of these other new characters we've been introduced to in this season. There's Agent Fleury, played by Tim Meadows, or Cornelius as I call him, from Semi-Pro, Will Ferrell's best movie. He's pretty funny right off the start. I mean, he's kind of a prick to Economos, and according to James Gunn, he's sort of there to fill the void of asshole Peacemaker from the first season. Being a dick to Economos, making all these insensitive jokes, making grandiose claims, and possibly lying about sexual exploits. It's all very first season Peacemaker. So I don't think, at least in the beginning, he's really meant to be liked at all, but about halfway through the series, he sort of has a little heel turn and becomes kind of cool. Now, it might have something to do with Peacemaker referring to him as Shaft, since Fleury himself loves to give people nicknames, especially race-based ones. So I think Peacemaker doing that actually really extended an olive branch and made Fleury kind of like him. Like he even says, well, that's a compliment, which, yeah, it would be. Shaft is awesome. And like we see, he tries that sort of business with Judo Master, and it gets shut down pretty quickly, which I thought was funny because he engaged in that whole back and forth with Economos, a guy who has attempted to kill him like 3 times. But Fleury gives him this one nickname, and he threatens violent action over it. It's a pretty funny moment. But there is a whole payoff to the endless Ginger Cool jokes, and of course the nicknames he gives the rest of the Argus team during the fight with Eagly. But after Rick Flag does get his hands on Peacemaker, Economos works some computer magic to book him under the nose of Rick Flag Sr., and Fleury sees all this happen. He's like, it was good that you did that. Which I think is there to show us, the audience, that Fleury is actually a pretty good guy. He likes to do things by the book. He's not a shady guy to use his government powers to accomplish his own means or ends like Rick Flag Sr., Plus, we see him peeking through the window and how Flag and Bordeaux are all chummy with one another. And I don't think Fleury's a big fan of Bordeaux, so I think he's gonna turn. He's gonna be a new member of the group if he survives the season. Although I could, of course, be wrong. That being said, though, Rick Flag Sr., he's not really going to win anybody any points here. Now, it is understandable that he would hate Peacemaker for killing his son. You'd think a government agent, a guy who's done black ops and all these questionable things in his own line of work probably to get to where he's at, that he would understand the complicated situation of Peacemaker killing Rick Flag and all of the implications that it would have had Rick Flag survived and exposed Amanda Waller and what the U.S. government had been up to in Corto Maltese. I'm not saying Peacemaker should have killed Flag. I'm just saying Senior's looking at this really with blinders on. And again, that is evident. We're supposed to think that by the writing. I mean, he's constantly trying to justify his vendetta against Peacemaker as a threat to national security because Peacemaker may or may not have this dimensional technology that is now a threat after the recent Superman movie and Lex Luthor and all that. I think it's Economos, who, by the way, really is like the best character in this show, who points out that Rick Flag Sr. is wasting a bunch of U.S. taxpayer money to just monitor Peacemaker 24/7 in hopes that he messes up so he could bring him in and presumably kill him and disappear him. I mean, that's what we see he literally attempts to do when he finally does get his hands on Chris. So at the end of the day, you know, Rick Flag, he is kind of just this simple-minded meathead. We saw him in Creature Commandos. He gets seduced by an evil princess and he's breaking his back literally to try and get back to her to save her after it turns out this witch Cersei sort of altered a vision so that Waller would be forced to take out this princess who the witch wanted gone. It's kind of a whole thing, but the princess turns out to actually be evil, and Cersei's vision, while fabricated, was at least kind of true, resulting in, well, how the ending of Creature Commandos played out. Pretty good show, though. I really enjoyed it. Dr. Phosphorus, the Weasel, especially the Bride, really cool characters. I just wish it was longer. I mean, it was only 7 episodes. Anyway, we see Rick Flag quickly seduced by the other new character, Sasha Bordeaux, this cyborg who Economos once again has a hilarious comment about. He says something about having a picture of her mangled body as his screensaver for a while because he hates her so much, and when they're like, man, that's kind of twisted, what's up with that? He's like, man, I didn't make my brain. I know reiterating lines isn't always the best way to review or talk about a show, but that was just really good, and I couldn't find a clip of it to put in the video, so yeah. Economos rocks. But now back to Peacemaker. At the start of the season, as we talked about, he's not doing too good. But one night he's wandering around letting his eagle fly in the dimensional portal, the hallway of 99 doors, that eagerly sort of lands at another door, one of the many that are in that hallway, and starts pecking at it. And Peacemaker's like, well, what's up with that? He attempts to put his code in, and it works. And, we all know this by now. He goes in and he finds an alternate dimension. He sees, well, what we could only assume is a better world than the one he lives in every way. His dad's house looks like the X Mansion or the Umbrella Academy house. The portal door is right in this grand library with all these different trophies. His dad's blue dragon hat, not a white dragon helmet. This one's blue. And all these various news clippings of this group called the Top Trio defeating these various villains and monsters. That's right, in this world, Peacemaker's dad, his brother, and him are a superhero group called the Top Trio. His brother's name is Captain Triumph. He's sort of a reimagining of this really old comic book character. He's played by Roy from The Office, the great David Denman. And his super suit seems like a mix between Judge Dredd and Captain Falcon from Super Smash Bros. And I think it's important to note that Keith being alive in this timeline would have had a huge impact on the development on this world's Peacemaker as a character. I mean, we saw in Season 1 just how much his accidental killing of Keith, like that, how much that affected him. He was only finally able to move past it at the end of the season when he admitted to both himself and his dad that it wasn't his fault, it was his dad's fault, and then he killed his dad. But now here he is, faced with this world where his dad and brother are now both alive. This is a guy who's killed both his dad and his brother, and here they are alive. His brother is an adult, something he never got to experience, and his dad is like a nice guy. He's super loving and sweet. He's the blue dragon in this world, not even the white dragon, so he's presumably not some secret white supremacist unless some of the later theories we talk about come out to be true. And I think it's just really interesting seeing Robert Patrick play such a nice guy in this season. Because we just saw him last season, and this guy, he's famously played like a hard ass in just about everything besides, I'd say, The Sopranos, where he's playing a pathetic guy, a rare move on his part. So it is really interesting to see this character, this guy who's almost always a villain, be so warm and loving to his son, when previously the relationship between these two characters had been nothing but contentious. And we actually do get a brief glimpse of Season 1 Auggie when they're going over the origins of the quantum unfolding storage chamber. See, a comically not de-aged Robert Patrick plays Auggie in a flashback when I believe Chris and his brother are like 11 and 12, something like that, but they're hunting in the woods and they sort of just stumble on an alien, which Auggie kills rather quickly, and either Keith or Peacemaker sees the mysterious doorway in the distance of the woods and they're like, what's that? And just like that, this wacky, mean old racist had essentially alien technology fall right into his lap to do with whatever he pleased. And what he pleased seemed to amount to building himself a dragon-themed white suit and going around doing racisms under the guise of fighting crime. But this version of Robert Patrick, he's not like that, at least from what we've seen in these first 5 episodes. But anyway, this is one of those videos where I kind of go from one thought to the next really quickly. I probably should have scripted this one out, but I think that's a lot less fun. So Peacemaker, he decides to go through this door and he stumbles on this alternate version of the world with his dad and brother still alive. Now while he's on his way out after having a nice fun night with his dad and brother, he makes a stop at his counterpart's room to just sort of check it out before he goes back to his own world. And while he's doing that, he's accosted by his, well, you can't really call it his doppelganger. I guess it would be like his variant, right? Well, Chris 2 immediately tries to kill Chris 1, and he chases him into the quantum unfolding storage chamber where Chris 1 accidentally kills Chris 2 after an extended fight. A very one-sided one at that. And that sort of sets up the big conflict of the season. Peacemaker had harmlessly interacted with the alternate world once before, and gotten out before any damage was done. But this time, he talked to his alternate dad and brother and stayed a little too long at great cost. He had to kill his alternate self, which sort of sends his mind into a panic, right? What are his alternate dad and brother going to think? He just killed their version of him. Something that starts to turn into a little bit of justification for running off to the other dimension at the end of episode 5. But in the meantime, he's sort of just panicking to clean up the body. So who does he call? Everybody's favorite character, and mine as well, Vigilante. Played excellently by the great Freddie Stroma. It really blows me away every time I hear this guy talk in his actual voice. I mean, most British actors, I can usually pick up a little slip when they're doing an American accent. I mean, it's very rare, but it usually happens once per show or movie. But I've not ever detected it with Freddie Stroma. He's excellent. So Vigilante, I think, is a big part of the character and the show of Peacemaker outside of just being a fan favorite. He's actually a really interesting character. He sort of represents this aspect of Chris's past, but he also acts as a sort of hilarious parody of vigilantes like Casey Jones. He's sort of a combination of Frank and Libby from James Gunn's movie Super, but much more competent. Although the running thread is that he still will kill over minor infractions, or at least that's what he says. We don't know if he's just trying to make himself sound wackier than he actually is, like how he says he doesn't feel emotions, when we know that that isn't true. Anyway, he's clearly an evolution of James Gunn's lovable psycho trope, this vigilante character. But even through all of that, he manages to have just so much heart and emotion, and he becomes this endearing, charming guy, this psycho. And I really think his arc is going to start picking up in these final 3 episodes, because there's a trailer for next week, and there's also this shot from the trailer of him seemingly in a standoff with his pistols in alternate Peacemaker's house, which he might be in this standoff against Keith and maybe even the Blue Dragon. Plus, we see a lot of other cool vigilante stuff in that trailer. He's definitely going to get some big moments coming up. But I just think it's really interesting how perfectly this character was executed and pulled off. I don't think James Gunn intended this character to be so well received and so loved by all that he is. But I think a good deal of that has to do with Freddie Stroma's acting. He really does add this level of earnestness and just real genuine lovability to the character of Vigilante, despite him being a kind of a lunatic. A guy who would definitely annoy you in real life, but is insanely entertaining to watch. But I have noticed on the Peacemaker subreddit that has gone a bit schizo since the alternate dimension world came out with no seemingly non-white people in it. But I suppose going schizo is sort of par for the course when it comes to show-dedicated subreddits. I mean, that kind of always happens eventually. I mean, not always. That's not true. That's a vast overstatement, overgeneralization. But it was going on for the first couple weeks after the 3rd episode aired in the Peacemaker subreddit. And we'll get to that theory soon. But aside from all that, one of the big things that was coming up a lot was people pointing out that Vigilante hasn't had much to do this season, but I kind of disagree. Him chopping up the body of alternate Peacemaker, Dexter style, with Peacemaker with this look of glee that perfectly countered Peacemaker's own look of horror, all while Evil Thoughts by Foxy Shazam played on in the background. I thought that rocked. Plus, he's got that really big moment in the most recent episode where he hugged Ads, someone he's been growing increasingly jealous of in a sort of harmless way, but, an increasing way. Understandably so, the guy doesn't really realize how annoying he could be. But to see him break down and cry while hugging Ads was a really big moment, I think, and it showed that despite what Vigilante may say or think, he is totally capable of feeling feelings and emotions like a normal person. They're just sort of skewed and misplaced and misguided. And throughout each of the episodes, he's had several jokes that call back to him not knowing various animal facts, or that really great moment where someone finally mistakes Ad for a prostitution ad, and he kind of has this whole bit where he's like, I don't kill prostitutes, only Johns, that I thought was really good. And again, I think the big reason why Vigilante works so well is the way he says lines combined with the look on his face while he's saying them. It just works so well for the type of shit he's saying and for the type of character he is. Plus, his suit rocks also. He's just a really iconic character. Him and Economos are my two favorites of this show. And Economos has been on fire, so I imagine it'll be Adrian's turn soon come episode 6. It looks like we'll finally see his mom as well, and that hilarious evidence lockup. We'll see how successfully the Vigilante has been at fighting crime, off screen, before we got to meet him proper and in between seasons 1 and 2, presumably. Just by judging on how much drugs and money and just all-around stuff is in that little lockup we see a brief moment of in the trailer for episode 6. Now, anyway, the third time Peacemaker goes into his alternate world, he fully impersonates his alternate self. I mean, something he'd already done technically before, but this time he wears the guy's clothes, he wears the guy's helmet, he uses his motorcycle, and then goes on a date with his ex-girlfriend. He basically fully subsumes this guy's life. We get a taste of what these alternate versions of characters are like. We have this awesome, hilarious moment with a different version of Rick Flag, who's much, dorkier and nerdier than the confident, stoic, stern one we know. Harcourt is way different. She's not in any way mean or masculine at all. She's much more sweet and kind, much more, traditionally feminine. I hate how everybody in the discussions around this season is like, oh, well, she's pushover Harcourt now. She's trad wife Harcourt. And it's like all these lame terms that they're just generalizing this character. I'm like, she just seems like she's nice and is easily taken advantage of. And then combine that with everybody thinking that this is Nazi world. And they're like, well, it doesn't matter. She's a Nazi. So there doesn't appear to be a clear defined antagonist of this season outside of Rick Flag Sr. But I think it's safe to say we know he's not going anywhere, nor do I think Peacemaker is really going to get any revenge on him because, he feels guilty about what he did to Junior and he was just letting himself get beat up by Senior. As much as I'd like to see Peacemaker beat the shit out of Senior, I don't think it's in the future. Maybe someone else will in the alternate dimension. Maybe Keith will. Maybe Auggie and Keith will. That would be kind of hilarious. But I don't really think that's happening. If anything, it seems like, in some ways, Chris is sort of an antagonist in his own season of a show of which he is the protagonist of. That seems kind of confusing, but hear me out for a second. It's not his fault. He's just sad. He didn't get accepted into the Justice Gang. Harcourt doesn't want to have a relationship with him. He somehow managed to stop hallucinating his dad in between seasons 1 and 2 because I imagine James Gunn didn't want to go with that story thread, but it is something that is acknowledged. But I say he's sort of an antagonist, at least to his friend group, because he's willing to abandon his friends, basically his new family, in favor of this new world, and it isn't for nothing. A surface level observation would be that he left because Harcourt rejected him. But I think the truth is a little bit more simple. The US government is essentially out to get him now. It's one of its high-ranking members, Rick Flag Sr., either wants to kill him or at the very least take away his access to this other perfect world that he's had a taste of. A world that he's convinced himself that he has these obligations to because he took away their version of him. So he feels like he needs to go replace that version of him in this perfect world. It's sort of a win-win for everybody except his friends. And of course, Rick Flag and Argus. But I guess at the end of the day, the real question is whether or not this perfect world, this best dimension ever, is too good to be true or not. Peacemaker's also going into this blind. He doesn't have any of the memories of his alternate self. He only has his own fucked up memories of his childhood. So this is a sort of risky maneuver. But let's look at what we've seen of the alternate dimension. Peacemaker, his dad, and his brother are a trio of superheroes who have defended Earth and the Washington state at the very least from various threats. These giant monsters, kaijus, and supervillains. And they seem much more well off and just better people, with the possible exception of the alternate Peacemaker, who is now deceased. He might have been the one outlier. He presumably cheated on Harcourt a bunch in their relationship. He had a bit of a drug problem and maybe a bit of a drinking problem as well. Enough to the point where his dad and his brother worry about him when he disappears for long periods of time and suggest that it's happened before. before our version of Peacemaker started interfering with things. Now, like I mentioned a little bit ago, the Reddit has sort of gone schizo over the fact that there's seemingly only white people in this alternate dimension. It's led to them to believe it is Earth X, even though Earth X is usually depicted as sort of post-apocalyptic and ruined. At least from what I remember. They assume because everybody's white, it must be Nazi world, of course, and I don't think it's that simple. Plus, it would kind of defeat the purpose of Chris having to give up something he truly loves, in order to go back to the real world, his world, where he actually belongs. Personally, I just think this alternate world is sort of like the Silver Comics timeline, for like the old comic books, like from the times where his brother's character, Captain Triumph, come from, and maybe some of those old Charlton comics as well, if I'm thinking right. And it's a much more simpler world. There's wacky, weird alien monsters and stuff that come and go and attack towns and are fought off by kind of equally goofy superheroes. I mean, I think back to how easy that bomb is to defeat and how stupid and incompetent those terrorists are. I mean, something like that is straight out of a comic book. They're easily defeated. I mean, I know it was a nice way to showcase that Peacemaker hasn't lost it. He could still go full Suicide Squad whenever he wants. Plus, it was a nice callback to what I would describe as the best DCEU movie. One of the best scenes in that movie, too, where him and Idris Elba are sort of competing against each other in killing people and the ways they're going about killing people. But the terrorists are super incompetent. The bomb is super easy to disarm. It's literally just a thumbs up sign and a thumbs down sign. And Peacemaker, he doesn't press either button. Obviously, he wouldn't press the thumbs up one, but instead he just pulls all the cords at the same time, and that works too. I mean, really, the world is, for lack of a better term, goofy just based on that alone. It would sort of also explain alternate Chris's inherent brutality when dealing with criminals. It's sort of just par for the course. That's what his character was supposed to do in the Silver Age comics, so that's just what he's doing. It's not really like any malice behind it. It's just how he operates. Same with Keith, just completely going right through that helicopter during the terrorist attack. It's sort of just a ridiculous comic book version of Earth 2, if you will. Now, sure, there's all that stuff about alternate Chris being a douchebag, a drug addict, and an alcoholic, but those are all tendencies shared by Prime Chris. Maybe with the exception of cheating. We haven't seen him do that, but we've seen the guy do drugs. He keeps a giant bag of coke and a bunch of weed around just in case he needs it. And he's killed a lot of people, some that admittedly did not deserve it, like Rick Flag. And it also seems like, in spite of all of his faults and flaws, his family and Harcourt and his loved ones still loved him and cared about him a whole lot. Alternate Chris, I mean, in the same way that the 11th Street kids care about our Peacemaker. So I think all these little tidbits that we get about alternate Chris are sort of like a writing trick to get us to judge him super harshly without ever actually having known him. I mean, yeah, he jumped to immediately trying to kill our Peacemaker when he saw him in his house, but he thought he was a shapeshifter or something. I'm almost certain our Peacemaker would have reacted similarly. So I do think that perhaps this Peacemaker was actually a lot more similar to our Peacemaker than our Peacemaker would care to accept or realize. I think the one part that he's hung up on was that this guy fucked around on Harcourt, and he just can't imagine himself doing that. Now, aside from the whole Earth X Nazi theories, there's a few that are basically like adjacent to it. There's one theory where people believe that the Civil War was actually won by the South, and somehow the Confederacy took over all of America, even though that's not really what the Confederacy was even trying to do. I think they were just trying to secede. So in that version of a world, there would actually be two North Americas, I guess. It gets kind of messy. And then the other possibility is that it's a world where the American Revolution never happened, and America is just sort of a client state of Great Britain, I imagine is what they think. And that's based on the Golden Eagle British Parliament symbol thing that Peacemaker has in his bathroom. And sure, that is an odd thing to have in your bathroom, but they got gold everything. It's sort of just like how Peacemaker's bathroom and room is set up. He's kind of a douchebag in this other world. Look at his clothes. Like he says, hilariously, it's like a Saudi prince threw up on him, or it's like the Kardashians' furniture. Like, it really is some ridiculous-ass clothing. Look at those shoes, look at those pants, and, the shirt actually isn't that bad. Maybe I'll get crucified for saying that, but I don't really hate the shirt. It reminds me of something they'd make Kiryu wear in Yakuza 0. Or no, that shirt just had a bunch of chains on it. But still, you get what I mean. It's not terrible. Although I just kind of view gold as kind of an ugly color, especially on clothing or shoes. I don't even really like gold jewelry, so maybe I'm just biased. I'm more like the Nox and less like the people of the Erd Tree, if you will. Anyway, I think having his dad and his brother turn out to be secret Nazis would really just kind of ruin the whole point of this alternate version of them, you know? Like, it's actually supposed to be this truly loving version of his dad who was just absolutely horrible to him in his own reality. And at the same time, that horrible treatment and who his dad was is a big part of why he turned out the way he did as well. But even through all that abuse, he still has a good core underneath, and most of that probably is because of his relationship with Keith when he was a kid. And then, you know, we all know how that played out. Keith died in that horrific accident where Peacemaker's dad was essentially having two of his young children fight while he took bets on who his buddies thought would win. And young Chris hit young Keith a little too hard and he started seizing out, to which Auggie, Peacemaker's dad, instantly blames him. He's like, you know, you killed your brother, you piece of shit. And I just remember the way he says it, like with such anger and hatred to this young child who did not mean to do that. It's just excellent acting from Robert Patrick, as always. Also worth noting, Robert Patrick has a YouTube channel now, and it is actually quite interesting. I'm a big fan of his, so it's really interesting to me. I mean, if you're really into 80s movies and all these different, you know, roles he's played over the years, then you might want to check that out. It's I mean, the guy deserves more subscribers. He should have more than me. And I mean, I don't even have that many. Anyway, that whole scene where Keith dies is a bit like Walk Hard, the Ballad of Dewey Cox. You know, except instead of a machete fight, it's just a fist fight. But the end result is the same. The dad resents the surviving son for killing the favored one. A tale as old as time, some would say. But yeah, we got a front row seat into just how messed up that version of Auggie was. So why would they make this one like a secret evil guy? You know, why not just have him be a good guy? Let Robert Patrick play this completely different version of the character that we had already experienced as a bad guy, and let's see this alternate take. I don't know, at the end of the 5th episode, we see that Chris has fully assimilated with his alternate family, and they're none the wiser, at least yet. Maybe, you know, I saw someone suggest that maybe they are aware that it's a different Chris, and that they're just cool with it, but that wouldn't make any sense to me. Although, who knows how this season's going to play out. I will say this season is, in general, a lot different than the first one. I mean, the first one got things up and going right away, and so did this one, but it's not as actiony, you know what I mean? That might be a big turnoff for some people. It's focused more on exploring what would these characters do after they've saved the world and gotten no recognition for it, and you know, they've also got all these new personal problems that crop up in life, like Adebayo having to deal with the fallout of her decisions and her wife essentially leaving her, kicking her out. And Chris has to deal with, you know, killing his dad and changing his outlook on life, while also grappling with his feelings for Harcourt. Vigilante is mostly the same, although he seems to be much more ignored by Chris this season. And again, that could just come from the fact that Vigilante does in fact represent this aspect of who Chris used to be prior to the first season. And maybe subconsciously, Chris is trying to just get away from him, and indirectly. But at least Vigilante has a whole friend group now to annoy, and I really like how everybody sort of just puts up with him. They all like him enough to put up with him, to almost enable his nonsense by engaging with his bizarre banter. I thought it was really sweet that they sort of just accepted him for the weirdo that he is, whether it annoys them 24/7 or not. Even John Economos, I mean, this guy, he's sitting at work taking calls from Vigilante just to entertain his complete nonsense. It's great. It's great growth, and I kind of always thought that was going to be the case from the first season, as Economos and Vigilante seemed to have a few moments where they just kind of got along or had really funny banter, like the whole Fargo thing and the ants bit in the woods, which has been extrapolated to several other different animal facts and different conversation topics. That's basically all Vigilantes had to do, aside from chopping up alternate Peacemaker. Economos, on the other hand, has had a heavy workload this season. I mean, he's been running interference against Argus for Peacemaker without Peacemaker even knowing, keeping secrets about the quantum unfolding chamber, keeping all that from Argus while risking his job for it. So it shows that, you know, we keep being told several times is that Economos, you know, he doesn't like people. He doesn't form relationships with people, but he clearly likes the 11th Street kids. It goes without a doubt that is the case. and he is in many ways their secret weapon at Economos. I like to think that Harcourt and Economos, if you combined them, they would create something similar to my own personality. Although that's sort of arbitrary, and I don't like to compare. I mean, it's exact. It's not a one-to-one, obviously, but it's I find them both really relatable in different ways. I see a lot of people thinking Harcourt is kind of a bitch this season, but, she was kind of a bitch last season in one of the best ways possible. We actually learn and understand more of why she was that way in the first season and this season, when it turns out that her and Rick Flag Jr. were actually really close friends who occasionally hooked up. It seemed like Jr. was actually pressing for an actual relationship with her, which she didn't seem to want because she valued his friendship. So her hostility towards Peacemaker is finally explained and explored a little bit. Now fast forward to the second season, and it's kind of complicated, right? Because she's hooked up with him. She has some sort of feelings for him, whether it's just friendly or something else, because the guy did nurse her back to health after she almost died at the end of season 1, and she gave him that smile at the end of the season. It just seemed like they would eventually make it there, but at the time we didn't know about her history with Rick Flag, so, it can go either way. One thing I really like is in that preview for the next episode where she sees a picture of alternate herself and Peacemaker, and she's like, she sounds kind of frustrated, like, he can't just trust in the wisdom of the universe. He had to go to an alternate dimension to hook up with a fake me. It just seems really like that. It's going to be an interesting last set of episodes. And look, I do understand when people are saying that it seems like the pacing is a lot slower this season, but I really do think that it's been paced, it is slower than the first season, but that's because the first season had kind of a fast pace, if you ask me. It kind of, one thing led to another and real quick, and like I said, there was no fat on it. Everything was in service to the characters and the plots and all the beats. It was perfect season of TV. And this is taking the growth and everything that had been earned from the first season, and it's building further off of it, and there's a big important distinction here, is that the first season of Peacemaker took place at the end of a decomposing, rotting corpse of a shared cinematic universe. He kind of could say anything and do anything there. Whereas this second season is essentially the second live-action entry into a whole new cinematic universe that he is fully in charge of and fully responsible for if it fucks up. But that's not even the main point. He's got to establish the world. He's got to sort of take things a little bit slower to build and establish this world that we're in. And look, that's just my read on it. I'm not running interference for Gunn. I like a slower paced story occasionally, and these are all characters I'd love to spend more time with, and that's what we're getting. I mean, again, except for some of them. Some of them are getting a lot less focused than others, but like I said, I really think that they're going to get their time to shine in the next couple of episodes. And a good example of what I would assume to be James Gunn focusing on building the world of his new cinematic universe is the stuff with Eagly and Red St. Wild, Michael Rooker's character. It's sort of a quick little subplot that goes away just as quickly as it shows up, but it firmly establishes that magic and magical spirits and stuff like that exist in this new universe. And it's a pretty funny little subplot with enough good jokes to, in my opinion, justify and sustain its existence. Funny little subplot as far as I'm concerned, and it might even pop back up at some point. It also quickly establishes that, of course, Eagly is not just an ordinary eagle. He is something else, something that James Gunn describes as the most powerful member of the 11th Street Kids. So that is worth noting. The scene also established that he has dominion over other eagles. It's a cool moment. Although this is one of those things that I don't think James Gunn really planned ahead for, and it's something that maybe came up during the writing of this season as opposed to last one, because there's that whole big thing last season where Auggie punched Eagly midair and Peacemaker had to take Eagly to the vets, and there was that brief moment where he wasn't sure if his little buddy was going to pull through. And then afterwards we have the iconic second hug that, it makes Adebayo believe in miracles. That first season really is something special. But that being said, maybe being the prime eagle doesn't make you immortal or even invulnerable. It just gives you the ability to conjure up a flock of eagles to tear apart your foes. And maybe only other shaman or magic users can see the flaming bird that exists behind Eagly, or within Eagly. Now, I think that's everything I wanted to cover, but everything was kind of all over the place in that video. My thoughts were not organized in any kind of sequence or, anything like that. So at the end of the day, I hope this review of sorts was somewhat informative, amusing, or insightful, or maybe it gave you different ways to look at certain theories. Maybe it didn't. Maybe you're still fully on board the Nazi Earth theory. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. It does seem like a possibility. Although, from what I know, the Nazis in our world, they were really into iconography and their symbols. The things that we have not seen and that Peacemaker would recognize in an alternate Earth. Although maybe the Nazi symbols are completely different in this world. Who knows? So yeah, there's nothing wrong with thinking that theory. I just got a little annoyed by how that's all anybody wanted to talk about in regards to the season. I mean, you had all this cool character stuff happening and other interesting things happening, and everybody's just focused on it being a Nazi world, not even the other possibilities of what that world could be. And again, if it does turn out to be some version of Earth X, I will eat my words in the second review. But until that happens, I'm going to stick to my guns and hope that that's not the case. I mean, I guess I'm hoping for an even bigger twist, and all the evidence that people are using towards it being Earth X is just one big red herring, or maybe it was a way of getting people to realize that they see racism everywhere. They see, you had people in that subreddit bringing up these ashtrays and every little thing, and they're like, oh, it's a Nazi because of this, and it's a Nazi world because hardcore doesn't know the phrase what's happening. That's another big one that people were using. They can't even entertain the possibility that hardcore is saying what's happening, repeating it back to Peacemaker in reference to, being curious as to what he's even fucking talking about. She's like, what do you mean what's happening? Like, what are you here for? Not anything having to do with the African American influence on the English language. I mean, you literally had people going down rabbit holes. At a certain point, they were going to start, measuring skull shapes and looking for indentions. And that might have been something that Gunn was planning for by having all the white extras in the background. I don't know. It's just something funny to think about. I've been really enjoying this season and the discourse around it, but just for like a couple weeks there, it was really all anybody wanted to talk about. And again, there's nothing wrong with that theory. I even liked it at first. I just eventually got annoyed by hearing it so much and all these crazy justifications people were using as proof that it was Earth X. I did want to mention that I've been really enjoying the soundtrack this season as well. Maybe not as much as I enjoyed the first season soundtrack, but that remains to be seen considering that we haven't heard it all yet. But I think the new opening is also a really good example for the different vibe, and I hate that word, of this season of Peacemaker as opposed to the first one. And again, it's like James Gunn said, you're never going to top a perfect opening like the first seasons. You're going to have to just go for something different and hope it resonates with people in the same way, or at least in a similar way. In this case, he went for a song that I think really fits the overall feel of the season. He chose Oh Lord by Foxy Shazam, which I think he's gone on record and said that that's like one of his favorite bands, or maybe his favorite band. And they even had the singer and the guy there just for the dance number for the filming of the intro sequence. And I think that's really cool. He always includes like the music aspect to all of his movies. Now, I'm trying to think, is there anything I'm forgetting? Oh yeah, Judo Master. For a guy who doesn't say much, he really has a memorable presence. He's always eating those hot Cheetos, and he's essentially Peacemaker's arch nemesis. He's the Majima to Peacemaker's Kiryu. He's always gonna seek him out to fight him endlessly. And Peacemaker's always destined to view him as a sort of annoyance when just at the most inconvenient times, there he is showing up ready to fight Peacemaker. I think that's a really great dynamic that they have. It's subtle, and they're both characters from the old Charlton comics, so it sort of fits. And yeah, I think it's been sort of obvious, this dynamic, since season 1. I just didn't notice it until Judo Master followed Peacemaker into the quantum unfolding storage chamber as it was closing. See, no matter where Peacemaker goes, Judo Master is going to follow in an attempt to fight him. Just a really great character, and Lee he really kills it. He's you gotta love to see a short king kick ass, especially when he's fighting dudes the size of John Cena. It really makes their fight scenes really entertaining and dynamic, because you've got this really huge guy fighting this really small guy, and both of them know how to fight pretty goddamn good. So it's always entertaining. That's why I love Judo Master. Plus, the back and forth that he and Peacemaker have are fucking hilarious. Like, I always think back to when when Peacemaker tells Judo Master that he would replace his Achilles tendon with Judo Master's whole body. It's just stuff like that is why I enjoy this show. But look, I've talked enough about these first 5 episodes of Peacemaker. Let me know what you guys think in the comments about this current season so far, and we'll see how the rest of it plays out, you know. As always, if you found this video to be somewhat enjoyable, please consider liking it. If you disliked it, please dislike it. And if you like hearing me ramble on about various subjects, you know, usually lore, but I am trying to branch out and talk about TV shows and movies since I'm really passionate about that as well. And maybe I'll finally get to doing some game reviews. You know, I think what it always is that I'm afraid that I'm going to forget to say something that I really wanted to say in the review. And that's like, even if I script it out, I'm still worried that I might forget something important. And I need to just get over that. If I forget stuff, then you guys will let me know in the comments. There's nothing really wrong with that. I need to just, get over it and get back to making these fun videos. But that is enough rambling on that topic for now. Let's have our outro and then some final thoughts. So I'd say overall, the new season is a bit like the new opening. Different, but still really good. It's not topping what came before, but it's building on it, adding depth, evolving characters, which makes sense since this season takes place at the start of a new DCU, and the first one took place in the decomposing stages of the DCEU's corpse. There's obviously more of a precedent to build the world and grow it, if you will, in this season than there was in the last, when in season 1, obviously James Gunn could do whatever he wanted, as I already mentioned, and it really didn't have any consequences. He wasn't trying to build a world. It wasn't his established, planned world anyway. This is different. But that's something I may have already even covered in the video. It was so long I kind of tend to forget what I talk about sometimes. It kind of happens to the best of us. But there are a few things I wanted to bring up, like Peacemaker's general state of mind, and how him leaving for this other dimension in spite of his friend's pleas could be a sort of metaphor for suicide. Think about it. He's choosing to go to a place that he's decided is better than the place he's at, and all of his friends are trying to stop him from doing this, but he does it anyway, and then he closes the door behind him, ensuring that no one else can follow him unless they try really hard. He's actively hoping that they're all better off without him, when really there's not much to suggest that that would be the case. I mean, they love Peacemaker. Now, I think I've already talked enough about the alternate Earth theories. The main reason I can't entirely rule out the possibility of a Nazi Earth and Keith and Auggie actually being bad guys is that James Gunn has done this kind of thing before, like in Guardians 2, where Ego was seemingly too good to be true. I mean, not seemingly, he was. He turned out to be a pretty bad guy, worse and more powerful than a lot of the other MCU villains, from my memory at least. Maybe it was just because he was played by Kurt Russell, you know, that I found him so memorable. And I wouldn't entirely put it past James Gunn doing something similar again. I mean, like I said, we've got various callbacks to his previous works. In fact, the whole first season of Peacemaker 1 is sort of like a combination of all of James Gunn's previous movies. It's got aspects of every single one of his movies, and most of his movies do, but it sort of felt like this culmination of all of the films of James Gunn up to that point. But yeah, I can't entirely rule it out, but I think that was everything I had in my notes that I possibly forgot to mention. Again, I'm sorry if I repeated myself. You guys know that. I'll try and cut out some of the repeating and editing, but I'm going to try and keep this momentum up. I've got a big video on ghouls that I just need to finish editing together, and then I want to talk about the Elden Ring movie, and then I've got this really fun story about the asinine origins of a certain character from Elder Scrolls. A lot of good stuff coming, and a lot of things in idea phase right now that I think might turn out pretty cool. But until then, I will see you guys very soon. But yeah, be safe and see ya.